Peace and welcome to the culture right here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Folks, let's talk about what's going on. First, HBCUs get money to protect itself against bomb threats. We talked to the founder of Black Women Views, Miss Reese Colbert, to give us some insight about the big announcement made by the vice president. Also, educating while Black. We discuss it with the former superintendent of Baltimore County Schools about what it means to be a black educator in a white system. And then later, does America have a free speech problem? I would say yes. The New York Times put out an op-ed saying that we have some fundamental issues with communication, and it's got everybody talking. So we'll get into that discussion. We got that and a whole lot more, so stay with us. It's Friday edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. I'm ready to go. Are you? Then let's go. Folks, welcome to the show. Welcome. Man, oh man, we got a lot to get to, so let's jump right into it. First and foremost, the HBCUs in this country have been under attack. We have talked about this here on this show and of course on the Black Star Network, how a number of HBCUs were under bomb threats. Now, fortunately, no one has gotten hurt. No bomb was detonated, and it was revealed that there were a couple of teenagers behind the bomb scare. However, the bomb threats left an indelible impression upon HBCUs and their administrations. And so now it has been announced by Vice President Kamala Harris that there's going to be some resources and funding behind an effort to make sure that HBCUs are protected. Now, the vice president has gone on to say that this is a very, very real issue, saying that, quote, our administration is sending a very clear message. This intimidation will not stand and we will not be intimidated. We will do everything in our power to protect all of our communities from violence and from hate. We are in this together and we must stand together. Every American should be able to learn, work, worship, and gather without fear. It is our duty to do everything we can to protect all of our communities from harm against any one of our communities. This is a harm against all of us. Now, the vice president has gone on to make the announcement just yesterday, and as the announcement was made, there was some discussion and some gratefulness coming from the HBCU community within here in Baltimore. Morgan State University President Dr. David Wilson has gone on to say, quote, the White House is now saying that institutions like Morgan and other HBCU schools that have been threatened in this space where we have had to draw upon our operating sources, parsimonious as they are, to enable us to hire more counselors, to hire more security guards, and to create, if you will, another kind of protective layer on our campus that we can now apply to get some federal support to enable us to do that. This is just some of the remarks here from Dr. David Wilson, president of Morgan State University, after that announcement yesterday by Vice President Kamala Harris has been made. I wanted to talk to the founder of Black Women Views, my sister. Y'all saw me and her on Thursdays, folks, on Roland Martin Unfiltered. So I'm very, very happy and humbled that she took the she accepted our invitation to be with us today here on The Culture to talk to us a little bit about this initiative and this effort. Mrs. Reese Colbert is joining us today. Reese, always good to talk to you. How are you?
I'm good. So good to be reunited, Farajii, and on your show. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Reese, it is a pleasure, absolute pleasure. So we know that you were on the ground. This is why I had to invite you. I was like, Reese said she was going to be there. You were there. First and foremost, let's talk about the big issue, which was the issue of the bomb threats, right?
Right.
We saw a rash of these threats coming in starting in early January, even into Black History Month. But do you get a sense at this point that HBCUs still feel safe, or are these administrations that are running these HBCUs are on edge about what could possibly happen next?
I think that the sense of security is shaken, but I certainly think that they have moved beyond that initial just shock of the spate of bomb threats. I mean, on Black History Month, the first day, 14 universities received bomb threats, and multiple universities have received multiple bomb scares since the beginning of this rash of bomb threats. You mentioned earlier that 6 juveniles had been identified, but that's only in one case. We don't know if they're behind all of the bomb scares or bomb threats. There have been over 56 institutions that are 56 incidents since January of these bomb threats occurring, and they've occurred through calls, through message boards, in a number of ways. And so I think there is still a sense of, we still need support. We're not out of the woods yet. But I did also get the sense that there is a lot more coordination happening between HBCUs and the White House and the agencies involved with the Biden-Harris administration than we had previously known. So that information that I found out at the event convened by Vice President Kamala Harris was really heartening to hear and really encouraging.
So, I mean, I know that the conversation is always a bit about funding for more HBCUs, How much money are we actually talking about at this point for at least this part of the initiative?
So the specific initiative that Vice President Kamala Harris announced was that HBCUs will now be eligible for what is called these Project Serve grants, and SERV stands for School Emergency Response to Violence. And so essentially when these events occur, they're very disruptive to the campus. They're disruptive to the students in terms of their mental health and their sense of security. So these grants range between $50,000 and $150,000. These are short-term, immediate grants that would be that these schools will be eligible for. And, after the official event, we had a huddle with Jackson State University President Dr. Thomas Hudson. And he was asked because, it doesn't sound like a lot of money, right? I mean, $50,000, $150,000. What can you really do with that? But he did say that this money can go a long way in supplementing and shoring up their responses. Because when you have these bomb threats, you have a you have a law enforcement response, you have security on campus, you have a number of things that, as the statement that you just referenced from the Morgan State president, are involved with, basically taking these threats seriously, but also getting back to normal. So this is on top of the $5.8 billion of record funding that the administration has given to the HBCU, so they don't have to dip into existing funds, as the Morgan State president, referenced. So this is really important. And even though it doesn't sound like a lot of money, from the feedback that I've received from HBCU presidents is that it will make a difference.
It will make a difference. And more importantly, the part that Dr. Wilson talked about, which was having counselors on campus, how will that roll out? What will that look like? Is that something that students are going to be, highly encouraged to take advantage of? Or is that something that is just going to be saying, okay, if you think you need it, we do have counselors?
Yeah, I think that's going to be up to the individual HBCUs on how they use this funding. The funding is available if they want to use it for mental health services. It's not limited to security services, risk mitigation, bomb prevention, or, surveillance, any number of things. They can use it for mental health services. But, in addition to these specific grants, there's a lot of coordination that's happening with the education department. Secretary Miguel Cardona was on hand at this event as well to talk about the unique trauma that these bomb threats pose to Black students because of our history of racial violence in this country. So there are a number of resources beyond these grants that the administration is coordinating with HBCUs to take advantage of. And just the one other thing I do want to mention is that Deputy Secretary John Tien of Department of Homeland Security actually talked about there was a symposium on the White House campus with the HBCU presidents, specifically on this issue of bomb threats, where they shared intelligence and resources on how to better secure their campuses and identify and mitigate these threats. So I thought that was really important because I don't recall seeing any kind of reporting about these HBCU presidents being convened at the White House for that specific purpose.
I know there was some word that the president of the student government at Xavier University of Louisiana said that some students were really, really concerned, feeling like this was like a trifecta level of danger. You got COVID, you got the racial issues and reckoning that is already happening, and now you got bomb threats. And that some students are feeling like, I don't know. I don't know if it's safe. Maybe I'll stay home for virtual. I don't care. Are you finding that there's some resistance, some pushbacks in mass from students?
And I don't think in mass. That's not the feedback that I heard from HBCU presidents. But I think hopefully, if people are aware of this event that took place and they look at the footage from the event, Attorney General Merrick Garland spoke, and he spoke about how it's basically an all hands on deck situation. In early February or late February, the FBI released a statement saying that there were 21 field offices that were working with local and state law enforcement on these bomb threats. Well, at the event at the White House, Attorney General Merrick Garland said that there are now 31 field offices that are coordinating on this. And he was very clear that their approach is not to be reactive and waiting until somebody gets hurt. They are, monitoring chatter for threats. They are taking this investigation very seriously. And so, for people who might have felt like this is not getting the kind of attention, the kind of headlines, or even the response from the administration that they feel like a Harvard or a Princeton or a Yale or a Michigan State or whatever would have gotten, I think they could be assured that this is absolutely being taken seriously by multiple agencies within the administration, and they are absolutely doing whatever they can to investigate and thwart any kind of threats.
This is it's a good thing that the administration is responding. It's still crazy that this is happening in 2022. I want to bring culture crew member Shaquille Mckinney into this conversation. Shaquille, you are a graduate of an HBCU, the Great Morgan State University. You work with college leaders. You've worked with students in various capacities of your activism work. What do you make of this, and especially the response that the administration is given?
Thanks, Farajii. In addition to everything you've mentioned, I've also been a student leader at Morgan State.
Oh, absolutely.
And I can just imagine, as I was in my role as student government president and gleaning upon what you shared from the student government president from Xavier, these bomb threats really did pose a significant threat to the safety and security and mental health of students. And therefore, I think that everything that the White House in coordination with the different departments and with HBCU leadership is instrumental. I think it's following an accord that we've seen. Ironically, it's funny we can mention, but the Trump administration started acknowledging HBCUs at a higher level, started with more funding. And the Biden-Harris administration has really picked up the baton in a stronger sense and in making sure that the issues that affect these communities are dealt with imminently and vocally. And I think that this will indefinitely create a sense of better security at the universities.
Yeah, I would say so. And I guess one of the things that my concern is, Reese, is that I mean, I was reading that particularly at Morgan, Dr. Wilson said that he saw an increase in the number of enrollment for not just for this year, but for the next academic school year, 8 to 10% increase. And I'm just wondering, you know, in the next few months, I mean, we're in March, coming up in the fall season when schools are, you know, in that process of enrollment, how much of this situation will play on students' decision to go to their HBCU?
That's a great point. I think that, you know, initially when these bomb threats occurred, I think it was very shaking to, you know, and it was a jolt to people because it felt very real. And these are real threats, regardless of whether bombs have been detonated or not. I mean, we've seen, for instance, a couple of years ago where a Trump supporter, Caesar Sayoc, was actually mailing bombs to Democratic leaders across the country. So this isn't something that is out of the question of realm of possibility. However, I do think that it's worth noting that the HBCU leaders have really done everything that is needed to be done in order to restore normalcy to their campuses and ensure that they are taking this seriously. And just the one other thing I'll say is that what's clear is that this coordination between the White House and the HBCU leadership and community has been months long. This is not a, a start and stop type of thing, a one-off type of thing. They've been in close coordination for months. So I think to the extent that people are worried about this being taken seriously, state, local, and federal resources are all hands on deck to make sure that HBCU campuses are safe.
So Reese, you know, I mean, yes, we're talking about that massive number that is coming from the federal government for the support of HBCUs. But what about pushing the pedal to the metal on states where these HBCUs are located? I know that something from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Janet Nelson, she put it out there that because HBCUs are historically underfunded as it is, this may cost HBCUs a financial blowback. And so how do we, you know, shift the conversation from the Biden-Harris to now getting these states to step up their support, or even the alumni to step up their support and say, look, we need you now more than ever because this type of situation can affect funding. I mean, how do we go about doing that? Or is that even necessary at this point?
Absolutely, it is necessary because one of the issues that has affected HBCUs is the fact that states are not funding the HBCUs at the matching rate that they're supposed to. Tennessee owes millions, hundreds of millions, if I'm not mistaken, of dollars to HBCUs there. In Maryland, we also had, Larry Hogan, who held up support for Morgan State.
Facts.
And that's been held up for years. So what we can do is we can put the political pressure on these states to hold up their end of the bargain. These folks are not actually fulfilling their mandate. These are mandated supports that they're supposed to have, and they're not upholding their part of the bargain. So when you have, this is an election year, this is midterms, so you want to get your local and state officials on board with this. There's also been movement within Congress to try to force the hand of these state and local officials. And then the administration, Cedric Richmond, as an advisor to the president, also talked about states not upholding their end of the bargain and how the administration is starting to help that. So there's a lot that can be done on the state side.
And I'm thinking, Shaquille, that, you know, with this, I mean, we see this happening in corporate America, that comes tragedy can serve as the impetus for opportunity. And I feel like there's no better opportunity to support HBCUs than right now, considering the fact that the environment is so racially charged and there's so much tension that HBCUs need to be protected.
Completely agreed. I think that there is, as we know, following the case of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, there's still this resonating sense of collective empowerment and vocal representation and advocacy around communities of color, and specifically as HBCUs, we know that there's been an increased commitment from corporations and even from large sports organizations, as we just saw the Howard and Morgan State Classic game recently played. And we just know that there's ever more reason, as it has always been the case. HBCUs are a beacon for really ratifying what the Constitution, as Dr. Wilson denoted, I believe, in his remarks regarding this collaboration between the White House, HBCU communities, and the Department of Justice and other federal agencies, is that we have always been at the leadership or at the helm of holding America accountable to realizing what it says it stands for and what it is, and what is decreed in the Constitution. And I think that as we continue to raise more awareness around the issues and the successes of HBCUs, that there's all the more reason for a galvanizing support.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Reese, what's the next step at this point? How do we make sure, and I'm saying from a community's vantage point, how do we make sure that, our students are going to be safe, as they, especially at these upcoming graduations? I'm thinking about, in the next month or two, we're going to be seeing massive gatherings of people at HBCUs. And I still know there are still reports that HBCUs are getting threats, even up to this point. So how do we as the community respond?
Well, I think part of it is, in terms of if you see something, say something, right? I know that's cliche. That came from out of 9/11. But at the end of the day, we have to be more aware of our surroundings. We have to report suspicious behavior. If you see chatter online, for instance, if you hear threats, make sure that those things are reported. But I will say that the HBCUs now have a resource guide from the administration that centralizes all of the resources that are available to them. And so I think that, and I believe it actually is something that anybody can download. So I think it's important to know the resources that are out there. But the one thing about terrorism, and these bomb threats are terrorism, is that it wants to break the will of the people that they're trying to threaten. And we know that Black students are incredibly resilient, and they will not be deterred from attending these institutions and perpetuating or representing Black excellence. And so I think that, regardless of what people try to do to deter Black students, they will persevere. And I think that, we'll continue to just keep our eye on the prize and making sure that students are protected.
I know one big thing, Reese, is that you're a huge advocate of HBCUs. And I know that they're struggling not just with these bomb threats, and, they're struggling with so many other challenges and problems. And, as much as people might not think that they're valuable, we still have I think, a duty to ensure the safety of all of these institutions, not just the ones that we went to or the ones that are the most popular, because they represent and they offer so much. Some of the top leaders that we see in this country come from HBCUs. And it's crazy that Black folks still don't see the value of their own institutions. I mean, we kind of like, oh no, but what about this? What about that? Versus saying, you know what, we might have its challenges, but that doesn't mean we tear down the whole institution.
Right.
So, I appreciate your time on this, Reese. And if there are any other developments, we'll certainly bring you back on to keep us updated.
Thank you, Farajii.
Absolutely. Good to see you, sis.
Good to see you.
Great. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come right back, let's talk about educating while Black. As we talk about HBCUs, we're going to be checking in with the former superintendent of Baltimore County Schools, Dr. Dallas Dance, to give us some insight of what it means to be a Black educator in a system that is putting Black history and other cultural history behind. We'll have that conversation. So stay with us. It's The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks. Well, check this out. We already know that being an educator in 2022 is a very, very, very hard job. We already know that it's a lot that comes with being an educator, a teacher, whether you're talking about in a middle school, in an elementary, all the way up to the college level. But then how much do we really know about being a Black educator in a system that is constantly at odds within itself, a system that is also under attack by parents and lawmakers? These are just some of the challenges facing Black educators. And I want to bring our next guest, Dr. Dallas Dance, into this conversation. He served as the former superintendent for Baltimore County Schools, and he has a very, very powerful testimony about his journey, but then he can offer some insight about how we can navigate through all of the challenges that are before us and Black students. So Dr. Dance, welcome to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. How are you, sir?
Farajii, thank you for having me, brother. It's good to be here with you today.
Absolutely. In a few moments, we're going to be joined by another educator, my Culture crew member, Shaquille Mckinney. We're going to bring her into this conversation as well. So let's do that. But Dr. Dance, it's certainly a pleasure to have you. You were the former superintendent of schools in Baltimore County, Maryland, right? But you got a story though. You definitely got a story.
we all have a story, Farajii, but absolutely I have one. As a young Black male coming into a district at the age of 30, and I'm 40 now, where the average age of a superintendent, is roughly mid-50s. So we all have a story, but I do believe mine is a powerful testimony of being Black, of really thinking through what are sort of the pitfalls that we always have to keep in our mind as Black people in general, particularly Black male. So definitely have a story I definitely love to share.
Well, yeah, brother. I mean, we would love to hear it. And, there are so many challenges facing Black students today, Doc. The challenge, I'm sure you know about the conversations around Black culture, Black history, critical race theory, all of those things. And a lot of people, and I'm talking to Black parents who are trying to figure out, like, if the public school systems across this country are going in this direction where they're kind of creating these barriers, these boundaries on really empowering Black students. I'm hearing more and more Black parents, Doc, who are saying, I'm going to take them out of the schools. I'm going to start homeschooling. I'm going to start to look into some other, educational alternatives. Have you been hearing the same thing?
So I love options, and I love having options. And so I'm a parent myself. I have a 7th grader, 12 years old, at a middle school, at a predominantly diverse middle school in suburban Richmond, Virginia. And so I completely understand where parents are coming from. I think what COVID did is it allowed parents to get an eye view in terms of what their kids were doing every single day. And as educators, I think we took that for granted a little bit. But I think also as educators, we forget sometimes to tell our stories. And so with all of that, and obviously with the politicization of what's happening across our country right now, parents are recognizing that they do want more for their kids, and that includes choice. But I'm a huge proponent of choice for parents, but I'm a still believer in public schools too. But I believe, though, if we're really going to right size this, it's going to really take us looking at school board elections with a more critical eye, and that's what's not being done right now. Those individuals who are, they're hashing out a critical race theory, and they're talking about banning books and banning Black history, which is absurd to me. These are individuals who are engaged in local politics, particularly at the school board level. And I think that's where we've got to get more parents with more compelling, diverse views, with more common sense views at the table to run for school board elections, because that's where the policies are put in place to govern your local school systems.
So when parents don't show up for those PTA meetings, when parents don't show up for those school board meetings, it really does hurt us in the end.
It absolutely does. But schools don't abdicate their responsibility, though, my man, of really just thinking about how do we engage our families, not necessarily through a regular PTA meeting. Because my mother, I came from a single mother who worked 2 jobs, and 3, if you count the one on weekends. She didn't have time to attend a PTA meeting, but the school definitely defined what engagement looked like. And my mom, she was completely engaged. And if that homework wasn't on the table every single night, I knew it was going to happen. But I think schools have a responsibility to define what engagement looks like for parents. So it's just not them always coming to the school, but it's us reaching out to them too. And schools have a responsibility of making sure, though, when parents come to the schools, that we don't push them back. And that happens a lot. And I think COVID allowed parents to not be pushed back, because obviously it was in their own home. And they saw in many cases what was not happening in their kids' classrooms, and they wanted to get involved, rightfully so, as parents. There does have to be a balance, obviously, because there are individuals who have taken, obviously, the last several years under the former administration, and they've used that now to bring out some of the most darkest days back into the present time in America. And that's where we actually have to get more organized, more involved, to make sure that we recognize the importance of those school board meetings, because that's where district policy is being set.
Dr. Dance, my wife is an educator. And she has told me, and I mean, she teaches 3rd grade, and she has told me the stories of how parents come to the school. Parents come to the school, either they're not prepared to have those important conversations. Parents come to the school blaming teachers, blaming the schools, but not taking the accountability to say, oh, you know what, I'm not home, I'm not present. I'm not there, I'm not paying attention to my child, and it creates this wall when you have teachers who are putting in hours after hours. I know it. They're putting in that time, they're putting in that work, they're spending their money for supplies, they're doing the after school activities, and then parents are still like, you're not doing enough. Yeah. And my wife often told me, she said, babe, I'm their mother, I'm their teacher, I'm their counselor, you know what I'm saying? I'm the nurse, I'm all of that. And it drains educators each and every day. How do we lighten that burden?
Absolutely. So Farajii, one of the biggest things, and kudos to your wife for being an educator. I love educators. Obviously, I taught high school English. I'm in schools every single week with the work that my company and I are doing. And so at the end of the day, I think schools have a shared responsibility, obviously, with parents to teach and to educate and to bring awareness to. And in many cases, let's be honest, many parents view the educational systems of their child through their own lens of what their educational experience was like.
Wow.
And so as I coach, principals and superintendents throughout the country, I have to always remind them that we're still responsible for educating, for bringing knowledge, for bringing awareness. And sometimes parents bring us the best thing they have regarding themselves, but they absolutely send the best thing they have, obviously, with their children every single day to schools. But I think when we talk about shared responsibilities, we have to define that. You know, one of the things that I'm big on, probably because I'm a former English teacher, but also because I've lived it in schools and in districts, is that we have to get a common definition of what shared responsibility looks like. Many parents may not know. I was talking to a buddy of mine who we were talking about Black men and Black men fathers. Many of us, because we were not raised by fathers, don't necessarily know what it's like to be a father, but we can change that. We can change that through community. But I think school systems have to create that sense of community. And we cannot expect, and I say this every single day to principals and superintendents I talk to, we cannot expect teachers to take the burden all alone by themselves. There's just too much responsibility. And they're leaving. And they're leaving. One of the biggest challenges that school systems have not opened their eyes to recognize is that the numbers will not be there in 3 years for you to staff your classrooms. So we've got to do something different. And that comes from our local politicians and our state politicians around licensure and things like that. But it also comes in just making sure that people understand the role that teachers play right now and the resources that they need in order to do their job, whether that's student support services, whether that's making sure that healthcare is brought into the schools, whether it's making sure that job training programs and educational opportunities are there, not just for students, but for parents and for families and for communities. We've really got to have an opportunity to take a step back and say, what is the community's role in making sure that education happens for everyone in the community, not just for folks between the ages of obviously 3 and 18.
Absolutely. I want to bring in my culture crew member who is an educator, worked in that space, understand the dynamics and all of the pitfalls. Shaquille Mckinney. Shaquille, good to see you again. When you hear Dr. Dance, we're talking about this. I know it brings back some memories for you because you were in the classroom. Look at Shaquille's face. She just gets real. Shaquille, like, boy, she probably heard it all. Shaquille, what's your take on this?
Dr. Dance is, he's right on, the perpetual confusion and I think just stratified relations that that happen between teachers, parents, school administrators, school districts. There are several ways that we can improve the system, right? But what's most immediate in terms of addressing these issues that we're talking about right now is communication, is identifying strategies and systemic strategies that we can implement. I love, Dr. Dance, that you lifted up that we need to essentially create a more comprehensive education system that doesn't only serve to educate our students, but to serve to educate our families, to provide opportunities for our families. And that type of through line will indefinitely allow there to be more grassroots organizing, awareness, participation. We also need to utilize technology in a more efficient manner to communicate and provide opportunities for parents and families to be involved when they're not physically able to come into parent-teacher conferences or PTA meetings or school board meetings. There are several strategies and resources that we can utilize to really bridge the gap that exists between teachers, parents, families, school administrators and districts. But I love that, again, Dr. Dance, you raised up that we have a responsibility as educators to be the in terms of advocating for what needs to happen, because we are the immediate recipient of all of the burden.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and what are your thoughts about that, Doc?
Well, and what districts, I think, are failing to do right now is recognizing the strength in their building principals. Building principals know their communities, or that's one of the expectations that are placed on building principals, is that you know your community. And your community is just not those outside of your building, it's those inside of your buildings too. And one of the things I have to always remind principals that our group mentors all the time is that your job as a principal, obviously, is to be the mouthpiece for your staff, to be the sounding board for your community, but also to put together a vision of what you should be in the community that you are in fact serving. Because your teachers can't do it alone. And one thing principals cannot forget is that many of them, and majority of them, started in the classroom. And if you started in the classroom, you always have to remember that the classroom always has a look and feel that has to be removed from burdens if you really want teachers to be successful. Principals often have to realize that, they in many cases have to address and attack in many cases the bias and stereotypes that exist in their teams. And so I get worried, as an educator, and I'm not going to say former educator, as an educator, because I'm in the work every single day with people that we work with and colleagues and friends, they have to recognize that we all carry a bias. And so when we start getting away from addressing issues of equity or trying to call equity other names outside of really what it is, we're going to take ourselves further back. And what we're doing is we're setting up a group of kids who are not going to have the critical thinking and knowledge and skills to be able to solve complex world problems because we're not equipping them. And I think that's why principals are so important, and why I talk to and implore my superintendent friends in districts to invest in the role of the principal.
So that's one of the big things that I think, Doc and Shaquille, that we really need to take a look at is being in the classroom. Because one, I've seen and I've heard that sometimes principals and even educators are brought into the classroom without having that experience of being in a classroom. Sometimes you have, like, for example, in the school boards, some of these folks that are in the school boards never been in a classroom, never taught a day in their life, and they're dictating policy. I think we saw that with the education. She worked under President Trump. Now her name escapes me. Exactly, Betsy DeVos. Not one day in the classroom, just had a bunch of thoughts. You know what I mean, Doc? Just out there speculating. Oh, I think this worked. And you don't know. And it's like the classroom is like basic training for the military, right? The classroom is where it's all starts. Like for me, if you say you're an educator, I need to know you putting them 10,000 hours in the classroom first to understand the dynamics of what it means. Not that I'm in a leadership role. No, you're an educator because you actually spent time teaching and educating children. You understand the science and the art of that. I mean, and I see that a lot, that we're getting people as part of these decision-making roles that have never been in the classroom.
And that's true. And so two very quick thoughts on that, Farajii, is that really when I was a principal and when I was a district superintendent, I would always implore, and I would do it myself too, for our principals and our district staff to go back into the classroom, to go substitute teach, not for one day, but for a couple of days at a time, because it keeps you grounded in the work. But one of your main topics, and you're right, individuals particularly, and we're the only field where people do this. Everyone has an opinion on education because all of us supports it through our tax dollars and through our spending. Come on, Doc. But at the end of the day, though, we would never go to a doctor's office and tell our doctor what to do if we were coming to him or her for anything. But we do that to our teachers, which really just shows a lack of respect that we have for the profession, when literally we would not be, any of us, where we are without teachers. But that groundedness with the classroom is so important. And so school board members who don't go into the classroom, but yet they want to have an opinion on it, that's troublesome. School boards who don't talk to teachers.
Did we lose the connection with Doc? Okay.
Just exacerbates the problem, particularly as opposed to ameliorating it.
Absolutely.
So it's always important for school board members to go back into the classroom.
Oh, no doubt. Shaquille, what's your take on that? I mean, I know you ran up against, some of that BS yourself. What's your take?
Yeah, there is indefinitely an issue with continuous professional development in an administrative level. And by professional development, I mean opportunities to be most in touch with the most recent advances in pedagogy, in classroom instruction evaluation. And it's just kind of like this pedal footing that happens, as Dr. Dance referenced, just in terms of people being able to, eviscerate their own opinion about what should be happening rather than following research and rather than following the individuals who are actually doing the work in the classroom. I have a split opinion about preparation and training and certification for teachers. I think that, as mentioned, there's going to be a shortage. There already is a shortage of teachers in the country. There's absolutely going to continue to be a shortage of teachers of color, teachers of male teachers of color, because there is such a barrier. The stress and perpetual burden that educators of urban communities face are different than suburban and rural communities. Actually, urban and rural communities have more in common than anything in terms of the lack of resources and the allocation of fiscal support by state and federal funding. And I think that there needs to be really, a really comprehensive conversation around how we better fund schools to have better preparation academies and or partnerships with organizations I know that have traditionally been criticize one way or another, whether you consider Teach for America or like if you living in a city like Baltimore City or where there's organizations like Urban Teachers. These are pipeline organizations that take college students who didn't have an education background and prepare them to serve in the classroom for a limited period of time, right? Like there have been issues with these systems, but we know that we can look at other examples of federal sponsor programs such as AmeriCorps. You mentioned the military, ways that we can essentially create better pipelines into preparation for classroom instruction and educators. But I also think that there is indefinitely just, again, that comprehensive scope that needs to be evaluated in terms of what the ladder for promotion and opportunities are or advancement are in school systems, what professional development looks like on each essentially the spiraling of professional development that takes place at each level, so that each leader in the educational system, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a school administrator, whether you're a school district leader, whether you're a school board member, there is this interrelated process about how we are constantly advancing education collectively, how we are looking at education, utilizing technology, building relationships with grassroots organizations and or nonprofits that serve schools. There is so much that can be done. And I think, there is much that has been done, especially as we've braved through the pandemic. And I really applaud educators again for being in the classroom and sticking through, everyone who has had the capacity to do that. And there have been some people who haven't the capacity that I give grace and say thank you anyway, because it's not easy. But I will say that there is much work to do in terms of professional development, so that the people who are at the highest level in education understand what's happening on the ground level, and that there is a multifaceted conversation with all stakeholders to ensure advancement.
Absolutely. And Shaquille and Dr. Dance, I want to throw out a couple of things as we're having this conversation. One is something from Time Magazine. They put it out that 20% of public school teachers, and this is including those who are at charter schools in the U.S., identifies people of color, compared with more than half of the students. Only 7% of teachers identify as Black. At Lusher in 2020, 13% of teachers were Black, compared with 22% of the students. Also, the RAND Research Study Group, they put out some facts that saying that Black teachers were more than twice as likely as other teachers in the winter of 2021 to say they plan to leave their jobs at the end of the 2020-2021 school year. And so we're seeing, to speak to Shaquille's point, the shortage of Black teachers is crazy right now, to say the least. We're seeing more white teachers teaching Black students. My question, Dr. Dance, is how much does that impact the quality, the content of the education?
Absolutely. So one of the things, and your statistics are spot on. As a matter of fact, I think you'll see even lower percentages as we go into the next school year. But I think one of the things that folks fail to realize is that diversity actually benefits every single kid. Obviously, as you know, if kids see, or Black students see Black teachers, and particularly as Black students, Black male students see Black men teachers, obviously that's going to have a tremendous impact just on a mental well-being of a student, to know that someone looks like you in the environment that you're in right now. We cannot underestimate that. But also it does bring a cultural perspective even to non-Black students, that I think, and this is why I get concerned about this whole talk around, what is critical race theory and why are we trying to whitewash history? That's crazy to believe that kids cannot take critical thought and that we cannot present realistic information to them and they decipher it in order to make their own opinions based on it, as opposed to us trying to impose something on them. But, one of the things that you've talked to Black teachers who decide to leave, they'll tell you whether it's from microaggressions that they experience with their schools or with their teams, which is why the building principle is so important, or the culture that exists in their buildings. All of these are important things that if they're not necessarily getting what they need and the resources, it's going to be a problem. And that's going to trickle down to where Black students in classrooms are starting to rise up themselves and say what they believe they know they need. And I'm excited to see that. As a principal, as a superintendent, I loved student voice. And whether it was after George Floyd, when students started protesting, whether it was when COVID was happening and students started protesting, we have students protesting right now because they're not getting the mental health support they need. And we can, as adults, we can actually fix that and prevent that by actually focusing on building great cultures in our school for all students, but particularly students of color and Black students.
Yeah, I mean, and that leaves us to wonder, what is going to be the state of education over the next, or at least over the next year, with all of this tension right now, with this lack of cultural diversity being not just taught, but to be understood, And I think that and I'm a huge proponent of this, Doc and Shaquille, if the teacher isn't teaching it at home, that's when the parents need to fill in the gap. That's when the community needs to fill in the gap. Teachers can't teach and cover every single thing of a child's development, right? Even though they're there for 6 to 8 hours with your children, you still got to do something. They are not babysitting service. You still have to make sure that your child, if they're not teaching diversity, if they're not teaching the full history of certain things, that's when you come in and you fill in the gap. But Doc, as we close out on this part of the conversation, what do we need to do to create and encourage a more inclusive educational environment and experience right now? As especially we're in the second half of this school year, we're going to be starting a new school year in September. What are some of the big things that we need to start working on right now, getting prepared for the next school year?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, we need to recognize that we are setting ourselves up for a problem that we're not going to be able to solve because we're going down a road where politics are entering into the field of education. And obviously that always played a role because of funding. But what you're seeing now, school board elections across the country, which have traditionally been nonpartisan elections, are turning completely partisan. The Baltimore Sun had an article this morning that were talking about suburban districts and how, quote, America First parents, or parents who believe in the former administration policies, or believe that we should not be teaching X, or, that our kids should not be exposed to certain things, they're starting to run for school boards. Those individuals, as they run for school boards, they're going to decide policy. They're going to decide resource allocation, and they're going to be deciding who the superintendent is of that district. And so ultimately, if we don't recognize how politics are starting to influence education, getting to the earlier point of how we're being funded, it's going to actually take us a step back. And what you're going to see, and we're seeing this happen now, students are going to start rising up. And when students start rising up, yes, we love that. We love that advocacy, but why let it even get to that? We need to be willing to trust that we can actually give real world, authentic facts to our students. And again, they can use the critical thinking skills that we've instilled in them in order to make that happen. The last thing I think that we definitely need to do, Farajii, is really think about what curriculum should we be providing in our schools today? Are the things we teach relevant today based on even 5 years ago, let alone 50 years ago? You walk into some classrooms right now, and it's the same classroom that existed 50, 60 years ago. That's unacceptable to our young people. The advent of technology, of critical thinking, of virtual platforms, we need to be thinking about real world implications for what we're teaching our students and exposing them to, and allow them to make decisions. Because if we don't do it, there's a way they're going to find out, and it's probably more than likely going to be the wrong way, and going to take them down a road that we don't want them to go down.
There it is. There it is. Dr. Dallas Dance, we truly appreciate you, brother, and thank you so much for being a part of this conversation, Educating While Black. As things develop, I would love to bring you back on to have, other discussions around what's going on with the school system.
Farajii, anytime you need me, my brother. Thanks. It's great to see you.
Appreciate it. Folks, we got to take another quick pause. When we come back, let's shift gears. Let's talk about the big question. Does America have a problem with free speech? The New York Times put out their editorial board put out an op-ed saying that America, we don't like free speech. We espouse the principle, but in terms of its implementation, in terms of its practice, we just totally go against it. And where does that put this country? We'll talk about it. We'll be again checking in with Culture Crew member Shaquille Mckinney. We're also going to be joined by journalist Ashley Banks to give us her thoughts as well. And then also later on, let's possibly, we might get to this topic. I'm just letting y'all know, but we might get into this conversation about how the House has officially passed the Crown Act. And there were a number of Republicans that did not like this whole banning of hair discrimination. Folks, we got so much to cover, and we got a lot of work to do. So stay with us. We got a lot to get to in the next hour of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome back to the show. Welcome back. Powerful first hour. Absolutely powerful first hour. Talking everything about HBCUs to educating while Black. Again, we want to thank our very special guest, Mrs. Reese Colbert from Black Women Views and Dr. Dallas Dance, former superintendent of Baltimore County Public Schools. And in these conversations, I want to let you know, will continue to happen. We're going to continue to keep you posted about what's going on with HBCUs, of course, with funding and with their safety concerns. And then with Dr. Dance, I mean, we got to talk about education, ongoing conversations about education and getting prepared, getting students prepared, getting us prepared as a community, as parents, and then as community members. We have to know all of the dynamics and the challenges that are at play to make sure that our children, nieces and nephews, grandchildren are having an exceptional educational experience. So we're going to continue those conversations. But I wanted to shift gears and talk about something that I think is something very near and dear to my heart. I didn't realize it until really looking into this issue of free speech. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm in media. I do the work of making sure that people speak freely. This is a personal value of mine, folks, that, you know, when we started the show, and I told my producers, Joel and Shannon, and they said, well, what kind of show do you want? I said, I want the kind of show where people can speak their minds, right? Where they can do it, even if they disagree with me. Even if they disagree with me. Because I truly, truly value people's expression. I truly value people sharing their opinion. Now, if you're going to share your opinion, just make sure that you, to the best of your knowledge, it includes facts. And even if it doesn't include facts, don't, just share your opinion. You can share your thoughts on these things, right? And if you have questions, then you have questions. But the purpose of any platform, I think, any show, is to get people involved and engaged to the point where they feel like what they're going to say or what they're saying is important. I think that's a human fundamental right. I want to bring my culture crew member, Shaquille Mckinney, into this part of the conversation because Shaquille, you and I, we do speeches. We've had community conversations. The one thing that I know without a shadow of doubt that diffuses any conflict is giving people an opportunity to say what's on their mind, to get that stuff off their chest. And once you get it off your chest and the other person receives it, they actually listen and they receive it and they address it. It's like all of the hot air comes out of the room. People are willing to talk. People are willing to have a constructive dialogue. And it's just so important. I didn't think about it until recently. Like, that is an important value to me. People having the ability to speak freely.
I agree, Farajii. It is something that as Americans, I know that, everybody can't recall or recant their, the Bill of Rights or the Declaration of Independence, maybe verbatim. But what we know is inherent in this country and what has advanced all progressive action that has led to additional justices and opportunities that were not available to everybody when this country was founded is freedom of speech. It is the First Amendment. It is the most important safeguard for a democracy, and it is what allows people to self-govern. I agree with you that when there are opportunities for individuals, communities, political parties, all the sects of a society to be able to engage openly and transparently, regardless of the amount of contention that may come from the discord of disagreement, it is an opportunity for us to continuously sharpen ourselves and sharpen each other. But the lack of tolerance and the lack of understanding that was essentially really, chatteled in through the Trump administration, and as we continue to see play throughout the Biden-Harris administration with just the extreme division that we have in the country, is really creating a barrier for people understanding how to reckon with the responsibility and the privilege, if you will, of the First Amendment and versus the fear of recourse or what could happen if you say what's on your mind in a group of people that don't agree with you. And we know cancel culture is very real. We know that just as the divisiveness of politics and of general culture and of race and of economic stratification, there has been great, just really hard, a really weakened system of freedom of speech.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I think it's important, Shaquille, that we have this conversation. Again, this is not one of those hardcore news topics, but this is a cultural topic that needs to be discussed, because it seems like each and every day, our idea of freedom of speech is just being disrupted. And this is what the editorial board for the New York Times, they put it out there. They said America has a free speech problem. And I'm just asking, do you agree or disagree with this? So put your thoughts in our chat room, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, wherever you are. But do you believe that America has a free speech problem? Let me just share with you just some of the remarks from the editorial board of the New York Times. It starts off saying, for all the tolerance and enlightenment that modern society claims, Americans are losing hold of a fundamental right as citizens of a free country, the right to speak their minds and voice their opinions in public without fear of being shamed or shunned. That's the fear, folks. Now, check this out. I want to share with you just some data that the New York Times did around this issue of free speech. I'm going to just pull it up here because I want to make sure I'm saying it correctly. But this data is that, check this out. In a national poll commissioned by Times Opinion and Siena College, check this out, folks. Only 34% of Americans said they believe that all Americans enjoyed freedom of speech completely. The poll found that 84% of adults said it is a very serious or somewhat serious problem that some Americans do not speak freely in everyday situations because of fear of retaliation or harsh criticism. 84%. 34% believe that they can. 34%. 34%. I want to put this quote up there, Keenan brother. Let's put this quote up here, the first one, about many Americans. Check this out, folks. Many Americans are understandably confused then about what they can say and where they can say it. People should be able to put forward viewpoints, ask questions, and make mistakes, Shaquille, and take unpopular but good faith positions on issues that society is still working through, all without fearing cancellation.
Yeah. You know,
I want to bring Shaquille. I'm gonna let you share your thoughts. I want to bring in Ashley Banks, who is a journalist. She's a writer for many publications, but she's also in the world of media, so she understands the level of free speech. Ashley, it's good to see you again. Thank you so much for checking in, sis. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Good to be having this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Akina, let's put that quote back up there really quickly, because I want people to marinate on this. Many Americans are understandably confused then about what they can say and where they can say it. People should be able to put forward viewpoints, ask questions, and make mistakes, and take unpopular but good faith positions on issues that society is still working through, all without fearing cancellation. I mean, Shaquaya, you can't even state your perspective because you're worried about somebody just shutting you down. And don't let that perspective be off. You know what I mean? Don't make a mistake about your views about what's going on. Oh my God. I mean, we got into this crazy place.
We're in a conflated place in society where, because of such a huge volume of misinformation, and essentially like propagandized information that baits people towards positions one way or another, there is this very tribal sense of what we believe and tribal protective sense of how we want to present it and how we want it to be received. I don't think that America has ever, really scored an A on the report card of being able to fully acknowledge, and by America, I mean, respect to federal government or government structures in terms of acknowledging, respecting, and taking into consideration and informing legislation and informing the way we run society. It has not always fully taken into account free speech, but we have advanced the system by and through free speech. And I think the fear that people hold is really in a sense of that tribal sense of knowing that what they believe is not popularly or couldn't be popularly received, and or that there is a perspective that they are sharing that a counterpart to whom they are sharing, they just don't believe would understand and respect. And so I know that there is, as you just mentioned, there is this sense of like, and as the quote remarks, the sense of fear. But I do believe that oftentimes people push through that fear to say what they want, but it's just the retaliation that happens, especially on social media, that further discourages people to say what they feel and say what they believe. But facts have to matter. And so that really is at the bedrock of this conversation in terms of where people hold fear or where they hold sometimes too much empowerment.
Yeah, no doubt. Ashley, you are a writer, you are a journalist, you study communications. I mean, we're at a very, very interesting place. Some people would say that this is a that we're at a place where it seems like communication, free speech, which serves as the quote unquote bedrock of our democratic system, is deteriorating.
Yeah, I'm also studying law, and so
that's right. You're a future attorney, Ashley. That's right.
That's for sure. So the quote that you read, the thing that stuck out to me was saying good faith. If somebody's putting in a good faith effort with their opinion, whether they're tweeting it or saying it on a show like yours, Farajii, good faith is subjective, right? Your good faith effort may be different from my good faith effort. And so, yes, free speech is something that we all have a right to, right? But I believe that sometimes free speech crosses that line of it being hateful speech, right? Or it threatening another person where it needs to go checked. And so let's say somebody is tweeting something and they believe that their opinion is right, but at the same time, it's offending another race. It's offending the Black community. It's offending the Asian community. At that point, that person may be putting out something they believe is in good faith and needs to be discussed. But if it's poor to another community and poor taste to another community, it needs to be checked. There needs to be a balance. And like Shaquille, you were saying actually, Farajii, earlier on, being able to have a platform like yours where you can give your opinions, talk about whatever you want to discuss. But it is important to back up what you're saying with facts. And also it's important to have a balance. Just like you said, if somebody's disagreeing with you, that's okay, right? We want different views, right? We all think differently. We all have an opinion about something and our opinion should be heard. But if it crosses that line of being hurtful or offending someone else, it needs to be checked. Or if somebody is sharing information, like Shaquille was saying, propaganda, that stuff needs to be checked.
No, it absolutely does. And I think, Shaquille and Ashley, it forces us to say, okay, what is considered to be hurtful speech? Because some people grew up in certain experiences, certain neighborhoods within a certain culture, where, for example, using the N-word is not hate speech, right? We saw that the case with the killers of Ahmaud Arbery. They just threw the N-word around amongst each other, and in their heads, they're thinking, "Oh, this accurately describes Black people, right?" Versus outside of their little world, that's hate speech. That's speech that is wrong. That's speech that is offensive. So it's like there is a requirement, I think, sisters, that we need to have some things like there's a standard that should be. There's some speech that is across the board, no excuses, hate speech. But if you're talking about ideas, if you're talking about, your perspective on the political system or education or whatever the issue is, that's not hate speech. That's just simply having a different idea. You know what I mean? And I think that people should understand that. I think that people, we're so caught up in the name calling, but then even when a good idea is brought to the table, it's like, oh, no, we can't do that. We're not doing that. And I think that level of pushback needs to be addressed.
I agree, Farajii. My concern with the current nature of freedom of speech is this, kind of like visceral reaction to be dumb, deaf, and blind to issues. And I say that by the means of folks who are, regardless of what position you stand, politically, socially, economically, we congeal with our tribes, right? We're very siloed in how we are considering what freedom of speech means and how it should be enacted. And I think that, to your point, there is an opportunity for there to be more progressive conversations, at the intersection of communities that don't normally interact. Right. There needs to be a more forced, if you will, or I'm not going to say forced, but there needs to be more curated opportunities for people with different opinions and ideas to understand how to have dialogue. Years ago, I worked for an organization out of Hartford, Connecticut called Everyday Democracy, where their mission is to actually facilitate conversations with people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different political backgrounds. I mean, it is their job to facilitate the hardest conversations to ensure that there is a mutual and collective sense of organizing and a process that informs legislative decisions and or community building opportunities. And I think that, you know, organizations like that and opportunities that they create are the answer to this type of issue, because otherwise, what I talked about with, like, you know, being deaf, dumb, and blind, like, it is very easy. For example, I'm sure all three of us can listen to something ridiculous. Like, I think, you know, 2 weeks ago when we talked about Tucker Carlson's response to Ketanji Brown's nomination, right? We listened to that and we're deaf, dumb, and blind because it's just like, I can't, you know, like we put up an arm to it. But those are the very opportunities we need to be forceful in actually enacting a dialogue respective to not just trying to shame the other person in their opinion, but bringing facts to the table. The hard part of that, which Ashley acknowledges, is that people don't want to, you know, really reckon with truth. And so there has to be,
no, I'm sorry. I just, you know, and I think this is the, like, when we look at, and I'm glad you brought up the Tucker Carlson thing, because you know, when you hear certain people, you got to take in what has been their history, what has been their pattern. And for a man like Tucker Carlson, when Rush Limbaugh was alive, Rush Limbaugh would say some of the most racist stuff that you probably ever heard, right? You know what I mean? And you can't just be like, oh, well, he just said it this time. No, this is his pattern. This is what this man actually believes, right? And so when you do listen to somebody speak, right? If it's the first time, it's one thing. But if you've heard people for 1,000 times and they always kind of bring up certain things and say it in a certain way and wink and nod and all of the little dog whistles, it's like, bruh, nah. You're not just posing a question. You're casting doubt from a racist lens, or you're casting doubt from a sexist lens, or you're casting, you know, you're acting as if that this is investigative journalism, when in fact, it's just your bullshit.
But this is,
you know what I'm saying, on how you see the world.
That's the contention, is that is the, you know, what is free speech? That is their advocacy of a person who advances such, you know, ridiculous accusations or pours opinion from a hate-centered lens. So it's a marriage of us being able to withstand ridiculousness in order to continue to affront what is truth, what is facts, deal with it poignantly, eloquently, patiently. And that, I think, is the only remedy to this issue of free speech. Otherwise, we just continue to silo ourselves and call the other crazy.
Absolutely. Let me just share with you ladies just some of the comments coming in. Iman checked in. Iman Bell says, look, I'm a freshman in college, and this past semester, people literally laughed at me when I was speaking from my Black perspective at this predominantly white institution. I'm transferring to an HBCU. PWIs don't like free speech. Ashley?
As someone who attended a PWI for graduate school, so undergrad, I went to Morgan State University with Shaquille. And then I went to AU for film and video, and now I'm at UB, which are both predominantly white institutions. And so American University at the time, I was also a reporter in DC, and I was reporting on the racism that was occurring at that school, where students were placing bananas and nooses outside of dorm rooms where Black students were, or when they received their first Black SGA president, they were calling her monkey and saying all of these slanderous things. Right. And at times I was like the only Black person in my classes. Like, it was totally different experience from being at an HBCU. And so it's very unfortunate this freshman, Imani, is experiencing what she's dealing with, but she has to understand that not everyone comes from the same background, right? Not everybody has an understanding of what she's experiencing as a Black woman in this country. And maybe an HBCU is the answer. I know when I attended Morgan State University, it opened my eyes to things I had never experienced in my life. I am extremely grateful for the education that I received at Morgan State University. My professors poured so much into me outside of the classroom, inside of the classroom, and really just opened my eyes to the structures of this country and how I should navigate in order to be successful and to help other people. And so what she's experiencing, the fact that, you know, she should have free speech and be able to talk openly about her experiences without being shut down. It just shows you she is dealing with people who are closed-minded. They're probably 17, 18 years old, right? It's their first time away from their parents. We don't know where they come from. We don't know what they were taught growing up, but she has every right to express herself. So it's very unfortunate that Imani is being laughed at. But Imani, if you are listening, I really hope that this doesn't stop you from having confidence and from speaking up, because your voice does matter. People need to hear your experiences in this country.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Zoe checked in and says, Zoe is always a long-time watcher. Freedom of speech is a God-given right. However, it does not alleviate consequences. We will all be held accountable for every idle word that is spoken. I let me tell you something. That is one of the biggest things, Shaquille and Ashley, that I always keep in mind. The ability to express yourself is a divine right. And that's why I say, you know, I don't care who disagrees with me or not. When America said and put this as the First Amendment, if you notice, they put, you know, the founders, the fathers of this country said, we're going to put freedom of speech over the right to bear arms, freedom of speech over government, the freedom of speech. Because why? It's a God-given right. If you do not have the ability to express yourself, it's like a child. When a child is able to express how he or she feels, or what he or she is thinking, or what he or she is doing, right? And then when a child is able to get to that age to express themselves, we applaud them. We understand them. We were happy for them. But imagine if a citizen can't express what they're going through. That's a form of arrested development. And you're making your citizens immature. You're making your citizens uncultivated. And it is such a big issue. So I'm with you, Zoe, on that it's a God-given right. It's something that we all have the ability to do. We can even question God if you do it in the right spirit, is based on what I was taught. You can question God if you have the right spirit. But if your spirit is wrong in the questioning, that's another thing. That's another story. Let's go to Janelle. She said, the New York Times, in their defense against cancel culture, is ridiculous. It's as if they want folks to be able to say anything without any consideration to truth. This piece was slammed by many. Yeah, it was slammed by many, which is why we bring it up, because we need to discuss it. I mean, look, I don't care about cancel culture, Shaquille and Ashley. Like, it is what it is. But, you know, because we can get to a point where you could speak accurate truths and facts, and somebody will say, oh, they need to be canceled. Mm-hmm. And then the question has to be, Ashley, who determines who needs to be canceled? Because if you cancel people that are speaking truth and facts, then that lets me know where your mind is.
Right. And that's the truth. And so, as we've been saying, not to bring up Tucker Carlson again, but I didn't agree with the op-ed. Yes, I believe we all have a right to freedom of speech. But when you're on a platform like Fox News, which is still the number one when it comes to people watching cable news.
Wait a minute, hold on, Ashley. Say that again, because for the people in the chat.
Yeah.
Fox News.
Number one in cable news. Insane, right? And so, being that Tucker Carlson is on this platform with many other on-air personalities, the fact that they have this power, they're pushing a narrative, and people are believing it, and people are following it. And they're not necessarily always pushing facts. Obviously, the three of us do not agree with the things that they say on that platform at all. But at the same time, they still have an influence over who's watching. And many of us would like to see Fox News canceled, but then there are the others who would say that's freedom of speech, right? They have the right to say what they want to say. You cannot censor them. But at the same time, it can be dangerous, the things that they are putting out. Many would say they played a role in the January 6th insurrection, right? They played a role in some of the things that we have seen in the past when it comes to racism. And so someone, I don't know who, but someone needs to be in charge and enforcing certain types of, let's say, censorship or checking people to ensure that this freedom of speech is not getting out of hand. We are journalists here, you and I, Farajii, and Shaquille, an activist, a spokesperson essentially for the Black community. But it's important that what we're putting out are facts. It's important that what we're putting out is a narrative that is helping our community, not one that's hurting our community or hurting other communities. We're here, we're trying to better the Black community, but also to create a sense of equality for everyone in this country, as opposed to Fox, which is just trying to uplift white supremacy and make sure that white people are the supreme beings and that whatever they say needs to be followed, essentially. And so I think it's important that some of these things that are on platforms like Fox, OAN, which is obviously being canceled, I believe, next month, need to be checked, because it can be dangerous and it can create groups of people that can threaten our livelihoods in this country.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. Look, we're gonna take a quick pause. When we come back, I want us to continue this conversation, folks, and continue to post your comments. We're going to get to more comments, more discussion. I want to share with you a little bit more from what the New York Times had to say about this issue, and really, I want us to think. I want us to think so deeply about what it is that we're really discussing, which is having the ability to communicate, to say what we need to say. This is paramount, folks. This is paramount. And, you know, if you don't know, there are rights that are being taken. There are attacks that are being made. There are major challenges to silence people in this country, to silence us. And I'm not just talking about from the Republican Party, even the Democratic Party. We got to hold both parties accountable. The pacification is very, very real. And I don't want any one of you that's watching us today to feel like you don't have a voice. You do have a voice. We have a voice, but we just haven't learned how to use our voice to create the change that we want to experience to live the lives that we deserve. And we got to learn how to do that. We have to learn how to do that. So we're going to take a quick pause. When we come back, more conversation about free speech. Does America have a free speech problem? Stay with us. It's The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome back to the show. We've been asking the big question, does America have a free speech problem? The New York Times put out an op-ed from its editorial board saying that, well, this country does. Everything from cancel culture to us not taking the time to listen to opposing viewpoints. It has put us in a very, very vulnerable place within the democratic system that we're currently a part of. And I'm asking this question because I know that there's been some controversy around the take that the editorial board from the New York Times has had, but it forces us to ask this question. Do we really have a problem with free speech in this country? So I want you to agree or disagree, share your thoughts with me. We're going to try to get to as many comments that we can. And I'm also having this conversation with Culture Crew members, Shaquille Mckinney, who is an educator and an activist, and journalist Ashley Banks to be a part of this discussion. Ladies, again, thank you so much for joining us. I want to share some more thoughts from our watchers around this issue, because they've been posting some really, really good stuff. Janelle Fields checked in and said, Farajii Muhammad, those complaining about free speech aren't looking for free speech. They are looking to spread ideology and be accepted for it. But if something causes discomfort, they want a law. Is that the place we at, Shaquille? Oh, Shaquille, you on mute?
Thanks. It's summing up a phenomena that's true. As was mentioned from another viewer, it's like freedom of speech is dangling carrot for those who really come from a hate-centered lens, because they want to speak without impunity and they want to speak without being held accountable to transmuting, lies and propaganda. But I do think there's something that was raised in this article that stuck out to me, and I want to read it aloud. That's relevant to this point. I just really want to hear what your opinion is on this, because I'm a little embattled about it. In the article, they shared that ideas that go unchallenged by opposing views risk becoming weak and brittle rather than being strengthened by tough scrutiny. When speech is stifled or when dissenters are shut out of public discourse, a society loses its ability to resolve conflict and it faces the risk of political violence. And I want to lift up the example of the phenomena we talked about in the last segment with Dr. Dance, in that we see this attack that's happening on American education or in public schools across the country, primarily in the Midwest and South, where critical race theory, which is not something that is taught on an elementary or secondary level, is being used to advocate for whitewashing Black history and limiting access to resources that advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and awareness around the truth and facts of what this country, has done and has been. And so I wonder what you all think about this, because it's proposing the idea that if there is an idea that is, the foundation of something that is going to be enacted through law or through policy, that there need to be opposing views to it, or it becomes weak and brittle. I also want to raise the other example, which is relevant to this show today, the Crown Act. We know that the House passed the act with a simple majority, but 189 Republicans did not vote for this act. And it most likely will not go through the Senate, because the GOP has a restriction and a very fixed attitude against this bill, claiming that there are other racial discriminatory policies that will prevent discrimination by hair. But we know that's not the truth, because if it was, then we wouldn't need the Crown Act. And so I'm just wondering, what sense do you all make of this particular excerpt from the article, where the idea is that you have to have dissent. You have to have people who are going to disagree. Otherwise, there is no way to strengthen something that will inform broader society. And I'm, of course, asking you with the relevance of knowing what we're talking about with extreme views that include lies and propaganda.
Ashley, ladies first. What's your take?
Yeah, Shaquille, when it comes to that quote, you actually mentioned something earlier, and I took note of it, where you said, it's important for us to check other people, right? Because it helps us to sharpen each other. That's what you stated. It also helps to strengthen someone's argument. or to help somebody open their eyes to what's actually going on and to see a perspective that they're unfamiliar with. So if there is a opinion that's put out there and nobody says anything, then yeah, it can become weak, or it can become strong and people just support it. People who already agree with it are going to run with it. But it is important that we are able to have that open dialogue and able to talk about the pros and cons of everything. And like you said, when it comes to the Crown Act, yes, I do believe that it's going to fail. It's failed before, unfortunately. It's about to go before the Senate, but there are Republicans who are stating that there are other matters that people need to pay attention to. They're saying hair is the least of our worries, which we know is not true, but they're saying that we need to focus on gas prices or the homicide rates in different communities. But I like the fact that there were Black House representatives who actually pushed back. They spoke up and they essentially were saying why the Crown Act is necessary. Because when it comes to discriminating against somebody in employment, that can stop them from being employed, right? So then they're looking at other means to make money that can lead to terrible consequences. So there are real factors that come into play when it comes to a Black person being discriminated against their hair. I know in the line of work that I do as a reporter, there were plenty of times I'd worked and dealt with makeup artists who told me I needed to perm my hair. I love wearing my hair in its natural state. I like wearing it straight. I like wearing it however I want to wear it. But I have been told at times that my hair is not appropriate for on air, or that it needs to be permed because it has to fit into what society tells me it needs to look like. And that's discrimination. Sure, in that moment I have the job, but at any point I could lose the job, right? If there are enough complaints from viewers or enough complaints from people that I work with that I am not portraying the image that they want me to portray. And so I think it is important that we have those Black representatives who are speaking up today when the bill passed in the House, stating why this bill is necessary. Yes, other things are necessary too, like the homicide rates. Yeah, those are important. You can work on those as well. But when it comes to hair means a lot. It's a big deal in our community. It affects us greatly in every area, right? Not just physical, but mental. And I can go on about that. I have long stories when it comes to hair. But I do think that, like you said before, Shaquille, it is important that we do check some opinions, right? Because it will help to sharpen our arguments. It will either help us to understand why we believe something and back it up with facts, or it will help us to open our minds to things that we never knew before and can push another narrative that can help to make this world a better place.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. And to add to that, Shaquille, I think that piece, like you're talking about, ideas that go unchallenged by opposing views risk becoming weak and brittle. We're seeing that. I think there is a caveat, and I agree, but I think there is a caveat. We're in a time where an idea that is completely false can go on and last because of the number of people that believe the idea, not necessarily because the idea has truth in it. It's just based on the number of people. And we're seeing that with the big lie of what Trump put out there, saying that the 2020 election was a fraud. Look at that idea. He put out that idea before the election. Then he put it out during the election. Then he continued to put it out after the election. And then look at the number of people that accepted the idea. Now you got people within the Republican Party who say, and then, a significant number of Republicans who say that Joe Biden wasn't elected is not a legitimate president. That's just an idea. Even though the courts, even though voting officials, even though all of these different stakeholders that are involved in voting in this country say the former president was wrong, there was no malfeasance happening, the idea still is present. The idea still is persistent. The idea is still believed. So now we're in a place right now where we can't even get past falsehood. Like, we hold on to falsehood, and we are holding on to falsehood so much and so tight because we want to believe something that is not in accord with reality. That's not in accord. So then look at the impact of that, the end result of that. The impact of that is that now you're going to have a number of people coming either in this election in November or the presidential election in 2024 that are either not going to participate or they're not going to really encourage other people to vote. Because why? The lie has been put there. It's like the little lie that you've been told and not been told when we were children. Santa Claus. I will never forget. I had a show about why do we keep telling children that Santa Claus is real. And let me tell you something. And this is on Morgan State University. I'll never forget this show, ladies. And I'm thinking this is going to be an easy topic. Why do we keep throwing Santa Claus out there? Just tell your children and grandchildren that it's you. Do you know how many black people called up and got mad at me for disrupting the idea that Santa Claus is not real? They got upset with me, said, how are you going to take away fun for the children? I didn't know that lying was fun. I didn't know. I didn't know telling your children the truth and taking and giving the credit to another man instead of giving the credit to yourself. I didn't know that was a bad thing. So the idea actually can become stronger because of the number of people that can believe the idea.
Yeah.
That's the type of tip-topsy, crazy ass world that we're living in, that a lie can go very far, even though the truth is going to catch up to it at some point. But it can go very, very far. Hopefully, I answered that question for you, though, Shaquille.
You did. Both of you actually answered it. And it seems like we're all kind of on the same page that it can go either way. You can have an idea that goes challenged and it still becomes weak because of the lack of support, or you can have an idea that goes unchallenged and it becomes stronger, such as we see with the advocacy for banning critical race theory, which is just another word which, it doesn't exist. So it's a cloak for banning racial history and Black history, or I'm not going to say Black history because it's also Jewish history. It's also Latino history. But there is a ban for truth. And that is being advanced by the fact that there is not enough discourse on to rebuke that which is being said to advance it. And so it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. But we know that free speech has progressively allowed this country to live up to the ideals that's stated in the Constitution. It certainly is the only hope for us to remain a freestanding democracy, republic, a democratic republic, because I really do hate saying democracy because we're not fully a democracy. We are a democratic republic, and I hope people understand that.
Right.
There are limits to how much free speech or how much freedoms that we do have, unless it's essentially held accountable, or where we find opportunity through laws and or because we're a capitalist country through money. But I want us to constantly, those of us that are in the space, to advocate for this topic. Farajii, I'm so grateful that you brought this up as a topic today, because I think that Black people in particular have really been embattled with free speech as a means to continuously, it's something that we're not really confident in terms of it being something that we can utilize. And that's not just now, it's been a part of the history, right? Like, does free speech mean the same for us? Does it help us advance our issues in our and the challenges that we face in our community, beset by broader society, beset by white supremacy? Or is it just an opportunity for us to have voice but not have real action?
I mean, and I think that is the big thing, and this is why I think that it's important for us to bring this up, because we are certainly living in a time, and as we wrap up this part of the conversation, even though we're wrapping up, we're trust and believe I'm going to come back to this discussion, but we are at a point in time where silence is our silence on issues, our silence about the direction of this country, our silence may become a huge impediment for the liberation, for the freedom, justice, and equality of Black people and all people that are oppressed in this country. we can't stay silent because we're afraid that someone is going to shame us. We can't stay silent because we are afraid that we might be ostracized or we might be canceled. I'm not afraid to say what needs to be said, especially on this platform. It is what it is, because I know that you can go to the history. You can go into the facts, because I'm not going to use this platform, God willing, to espouse a bunch of lies. You can't be afraid, especially in a time like this, especially when we have the next generation behind us that is counting on us to say what needs to be said. We always say, speak truth to power, speak truth to power. But then we're afraid to speak the truth. Therefore, we don't have no power. You know, if we're talking about generating power, whether it's political, social, economic, educational, health, anything that any aspect of our life, we got to speak the truth, and we got to speak the truth and stand on the truth. And we got to say it not to be hurtful, but we got to say it because it needs to be said. And most importantly, it empowers us. If you just because you know the truth doesn't always mean you know how to say it. So we got to learn that skill as well, Shaquille and Ashley. There has to be a skill set of how do you speak truth to power in a way that's going to resonate to the people that you're speaking to and to the people that's listening.
That was the point I wanted to blurt out as you were saying that. Be sure that when you open your mouth to speak truth, you know exactly what you're speaking about, and you know how to allow it to inform those who would either agree with you and or have a counter argument against you, and be open to the counter argument, because it is, again, as I said before, what sharpens us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ladies, I thank y'all for both of you for being a part of this conversation. Ashley, thank you again for joining us for this discussion. Again, we're going to continue to talk about this issue, but I think we have some very, very big conversations to have, especially in this election year. We need to really look at some things before we go back into them polls this year and in 2024. So we got a lot to discuss. So thank you both, ladies.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, we're going to take a quick pause. When we come back, this week's last word. Stay with us. It's The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, today's last word and this week's last word is citizen. What does it mean to be a citizen of a country? Now, I wanted you to think about this. Only got a few moments left, but I want to put something on your mind as we close out the week and as we go into the weekend. But citizenship requires intentional action. It's not just a passive thing. It's an intentional choice. Yes, we are what they call natural born citizens. We were born in the United States. We were born in this part of in the East Coast or the West Coast, but it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that. And I hope that from the previous conversation, you understood that it's much bigger than that, because citizenship requires a level of action. We say that our democracy is being challenged, but guess what? So is our citizenship. We must learn how to become conscious participants in this system of things. And if you don't agree with the system, then guess what? You raise your voice up as an informed citizen to say enough is enough. Here's the thing, folks, about being a citizen, because this is why I say it's an intentional action. It is a verb. It's not just a noun, it's a verb. If the government goes astray from its values, from its goals, its mission, from its constitution, its Bill of Rights, then what should you do? What should I do? Do you go down the wrong path with that government? Or do you, as a citizen, make the conscious choice to encourage others to follow the path that you know is right? And that's one of the big things that I think that we are looking at in this country. When we're talking about free speech, when we're talking about dealing with history, when we're talking about anything that is related to the edification of us, to the cultivation of a people, if you see that there is a decline, it is your absolute duty. It is your right. It is your imperative to say something, to be a citizen. Because guess what? This country is going into and this is just my personal opinion, so you can agree or disagree, and that's fine. But I see that this country is going into a direction, folks, that now everything has gotten to a place of being corporatized. Everything has gotten to a place of just being a capitalist or profit over people. And guess what? I'm a huge, huge believer of people power. I have faith that people can change the government. Not that good government changes people, but the people can change the government. Yes, government puts in certain laws. Government can enact legislation. But if we, the people, don't embrace those laws, if we, the people, don't truly believe the actions that lead to legislation, then there's not going to be any change. But all of that is contingent upon how you see yourself. We don't have the liberty. We don't have the time. We only have history to show us what passive citizens can really accomplish. And that's not much, folks. At this point, we can't be passive citizens. At this point, especially Black people in this country, we have to start having the hard conversations that lead to the hard questions where we got to make the hard decisions. Are you tired of the way this country is going? If you are, the big question is, what are you going to do about it? Are you just going to talk about it? Or are you going to put in some work to show that your citizenship requires more from you? Now, we can go back and forth about the Constitution and being 3/5 a human being and all of those things, and that's very, very true. But we're here now. We are here now. And we have a golden opportunity in front of us, folks, right now, that in the midst of all of this chaos and confusion, we as the citizens can say, you know what? It's time for us to take over from here. Thank you very much to our representatives for your service. But it seems like your service is in your own interest and not in the interest of the people. That's the thing, and that's the way that a citizen would start to look at this situation. As we close out, folks, I want you to ask yourself whether you agree or disagree with the direction of this country. We all have to make a decision. And what is that decision? And that is, how will you express your citizenship? How will you express it? Are you going to be a passive citizen? Are you going to sit on the sidelines and just talk about change? Or are you going to be an engaged citizen where you will become the change? Hard decisions. lead to hard choices. But guess what? Considering the hard times that we are in, the future of this country, something has to change. And none of those things will change unless you and I, as engaged citizens, decide it will. That's my last word for the week. I truly appreciate each and every one of you for being a part of the conversations, all of the fantastic comments, the great shares, the number of shares. Continue to share the show, but we truly appreciate your support. And of course, the other supporters, if you haven't had a chance to give something to the Black Star Network, this is your opportunity to do so, folks. blackstarnetwork.com. You can go to our website. If you have not downloaded the website or the app on your phone or your TV, all of those things, you can do so free of charge. And it just helps us to continue to build on what the momentum that we have right now. So support the Black Star Network, support Black-owned media like never before, and support yourself in the process. I thank you so much. Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough, but I thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us, to tune in. And it is truly, truly appreciated. Stay tuned. Up next at the 6 o'clock hour, of course, my big brother, Roland Martin. Make sure y'all check out all of the fantastic programming that we've had this week, from the Black Table to A Balanced Life to Get Wealthy. This is phenomenal programming. This is what Black-owned media is all about. This is what we do. All right. So God willing, we'll be talking on Monday for another exciting edition of The Culture. We got a great number of great guests that are going to be joining us all next week. I cannot wait to have these conversations and show you how we are continuing to grow, how we are continuing to just have these discussions and just set the whole situation on fire. So make sure y'all tune in. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong, stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk on Monday for another exciting edition of The Culture, right here on the Black Star Network. Talk to you soon. Peace.